Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Sunday Messages. Today, we are talking about overcorrection or overcompensation. I am going to tease those terms apart just so I can be clear about what I mean and what I don't mean, although you could use these words interchangeably, but I want to make a distinction so you can energetically understand the difference between the two frequencies. So again, this isn't so much about what the word is, it's more about what you mean when you're saying it. It's more about the energy, the frequency that you're playing with, okay? Before I get into all of this, I have something really exciting that is coming up. It's going to be taking place sometime in early January, and I'm going to be sharing more about it, but all I will say for now is I strongly recommend that you get on my newsletter. So if you go into the description box or into the show notes, you're going to see a link to my newsletter. Go put yourself on that. You will not regret it. I have an amazing thing that is coming up for all of you. So make sure you stay tuned on there because that's when you're going to get notified first. The second thing, Eden begins in January of 2022. The container is open. It is open application season. This only happens twice a year. One of the things that has really surprised me about this container, I didn't realize the intention that I set was actually a much bigger mission than I could even conceptualize at the time that I first launched Eden. So the fun thing that has come to be is that because the container is designed to calibrate you to paradise, so the entire point of it is restoring heaven on earth, is alignment, is focusing on deep pleasure, expansion through pleasure, not waiting for an external metric in order to start creating a dreamy, delicious experience. That's something that you're bringing into present time. It's something that can be done in all professions, all conditions, all circumstances. There is no external metric that is necessary in order for you to calibrate to this. So what ends up happening is everyone who's in the container is actually working on a different angle. They have a completely different vantage point. Different things are coming to the surface. And so even though the container holds the standard and holds the frequency of paradise, of returning to heaven on earth, right? Of bringing that down, collapsing time. You don't need to wait until you're dead in order to start feeling good, feeling the magic. And so that has been the coolest thing to see, is just how paradise comes through for everyone in all different ways. It's not something that is a one size fits all or limited to one particular profession. It's something that emerges for everyone in their unique flavor and style and way of doing things. So if you are interested in taking the leap, going big in 2022, if your soul is saying, go apply, go do it, go do it, go do it, go apply. Listen to your soul. Your soul is leading the way. That is what knows what's up. If you're like, no, absolutely not, that's not for me, don't do it. Listen to your soul in that case too. So if you're feeling the nudge, I recommend that you apply. It is going to be epic. And one thing that I'm just going to throw out here is, if one of the things that has appealed to you about Eden is the fact that you get a monthly tarot reading from me, I would definitely recommend applying, because right now I'm committed to doing 60 tarot readings over the course of 6 months. And so I don't know how much further my capacity can actually commit to doing that. I'm kind of maxed out in terms of what I'm willing to commit to. So I might in the future end up dropping the tarot reading component to it. So I would say if you're really gravitating towards this because of the cards and the readings and the personalized every month reading, then definitely get in this round because the amount of seats that are available is the maximum amount that I have the bandwidth for. So just wanted to let you know about that in case you wanted to capitalize on getting in while I'm still doing those tarot readings, and you can have a personalized reading for the next 6 months from me. And of course, as always, link in the description box, in the show notes, in wherever you follow me, the link will be there, or you can go to onyxhealing.com/Eden. So if you are ready for that, we can get you all set up. And don't forget, this is the only container that, aside from my one-on-ones, where you get access to all of the DIY courses that I run. You get all of the live programs that I run over the next 6 months. So if you feel called to that, jump in. Now is your time. So this topic originally came up. I mean, it comes up a lot, but I didn't really think about it in terms of a podcast episode. But the reason why this came through was because I actually had a question on a Q&A that I did on Instagram. And it was basically about, how do I work with codependency? How do I not revert back into codependent behaviors when I'm entering a new relationship, if that's not something that's already super anchored for yourself? And that got me thinking just about, this isn't all type of codependence, but I think the majority of people, when it comes to codependency, they think of shape-shifting in order to meet other people's needs, being hyper-focused on what other people are thinking and feeling, and they're constantly posturing themselves in order to please another person. Now, the other type of codependency is more of a controlling type of codependency, where it comes from, like, I need you to do this, or I need you to behave a certain way so I feel in control. I'm going to give you unsolicited advice. You need to listen to me, and I'm not going to feel good if you don't listen to exactly what I say. That's another flavor of codependency. But when it comes to overcorrection, the reason why I'm such a big fan of overcorrection is because it will actually move the needle much faster than if you try to take only small steps that your mind can get behind, right? So the mind is always going to cap out first. Your mind is always going to be the first thing that pumps the brakes. So if you leave it up to your mind, you're not going to go very far a lot of the time. If you're not using your mind as a tool and you're just using it as the compass or barometer for how far you go, you're not going to fully stretch into your capacity or potential. So that's not a good, it's just not a good compass for people to be using. And what I find is that overcorrection is one of those things that solves that. So the reason why this question that I got on Instagram brought this to the surface was because what I realized, or what I was thinking about, is if you're going from a codependent way of relating to people into an interdependent way of relating to people, a lot of the time, the smallest fragment of choosing yourself or prioritizing yourself is something that a codependent person will perceive as being mean. Like, oh, setting a boundary is mean, or telling someone that you don't want to do that thing is mean, or, taking good care of yourself is mean. And so the interesting thing is that if you're already in the zone of this behavior feels mean to me, overcorrection is something that can actually get you to where you want to go way, 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 way faster than anything else. And when you just move yourself in the direction of way farther than what your mind would normally allow you to do, you start to discover new limits. Whereas before, the limit is going to be like 1% above where you originally are. And there's a time and a place for that, but overcorrection is something that can just rocket launch you into amazing things and incredible ways of being. Now, let me make the distinction between overcorrection and overcompensation. Technically, they could be the same thing, but when I'm saying overcorrection, I'm saying you're consciously going more extreme than you normally would. You are going to say, I know that I need to balance the scales, and because my scales are so imbalanced, I am going to just load up the other side as heavy as I can get it in order to even this out, and then correct from there. Overcompensation, for the sake of this conversation, is when there's an element of your life that isn't working, and instead of incorporating the necessary element, you try to ignore that and overcompensate in another area. If you listened to the being episode that I did, this is a good example of overcompensation in terms of if you're trying to do everything with action, if you're trying to exclusively make more money with brute force or energetic output, and you've capped out on that. There's only 24 hours in a day. Your exertion is limited by the clock. If the action and the moves that you're making are no longer working and there's no more that you can fit into 24 hours, you cannot overcompensate with further action or working harder or churning out more stuff, because you're going to continue to stay in a plateau by not addressing the element that actually needs to be carrying more weight, which is the energetics. So to me, overcompensation is, I'm really burnt out and I'm taking a bunch of action and the needle isn't moving, so I'm going to try to just ignore the energetics and overcompensate with further action, even though that hasn't been working for 20 years, but I think doing it one more time might actually make the difference. No. Working hard hasn't been working, so I'm just going to step on the gas more, even though I'm not getting any results from that. That's overcompensation to me. Overcorrection would be the opposite. It's, I know that I'm limited when it comes to action, so I'm going to intentionally carve out 3 hours a day to just do stuff that makes me feel good. And I'm going to see what happens to the results. I'm just going to throw caution to the wind. 3 hours feels like a lot for me. That feels like a really, really big stretch for me. I'm going to see what happens when I stop attempting to throw more action at the situation. The other reason why I consider overcorrection to be a phenomenal tool for people is because it breaks your beliefs really fast. So any negative beliefs that you hold, if you just intentionally overcorrect and you go hard in the opposite direction that you know you need to go, it will shatter any illusions that you've created for yourself. Let me give you an example of this. I had a client who, and this is, I would say the majority of humans, have a very strong correlation between energetic output and the money that they receive. So one of the pieces of homework was you have to stop working at a particular hour during the day. Even if it's hard, even if you're in the middle of something, you stop at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, whatever it was. Obviously, in the beginning, this produces a lot of anxiety because there's an association between, well, I've been working until 10 o'clock at night, and I think that working until 10 o'clock at night is actually what's been getting me money. So I told her, I said, this is going to be an experiment for the next month, let's say. You know, you have your income now, and then there's going to be your income a month from now. And you're just going to compare the two, and the only thing that's different is the hour that you've stopped working, is the amount of time that you're putting in during the day. And when we looked at the results in the end, there was no change in her money. They were identical, exactly the same. And so the reality was not that working until 10 o'clock at night was giving her more money. That just was not accurate. Let's also keep in mind, we don't actually know for sure what happened to her productivity when she knew there was a cutoff, when she knew there was going to be time in the evening for herself, when all of these pieces rearranged, even though we don't know for sure, I would be willing to bet that her efficiency, her productivity, the concentration of her work actually increased tenfold because of the boundaries, because of the overcorrection. And then all of a sudden she has evidence, oh yeah, it has nothing to do with working myself to the bone. That's not actually what moved the money experience. But now I have the same amount of money, but more time to be in pleasure, more time for myself. So the only thing that happened was now there's an abundance of time, an abundance of pleasure, an abundance of freedom that then happens from this overcorrection practice. So there's a couple different ways that you can use this because people are going to be using this for different reasons. So the first way to use overcorrection is I have a significant imbalance in my life. So I want to balance the scales. And in order to balance the scales, I have to move way, way, way deep into the other side of the pendulum. I have to go really hard in that direction and then see where I land and see what my natural composition is and see what I want to fine tune once I'm back in balance. The other way to use it is to go somewhere fast. Let's go back to the codependency example. If you're afraid, if you are terrified of saying no to people and setting boundaries, then the overcorrection homework to that would be say no as many times as you possibly can. Say no to every single thing that you don't want to do. Say no immediately. Do not give a fuck about how it is perceived or how it flies out of your mouth. Just say no, 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 no. Say it all the time. I want no to become your favorite word. You're going to regulate your nervous system and you are going to go ham with the word no. And you're going to do that for the next month and see what happens. When I tell you it will shake you out of some of these fears, I mean it. If you just get to the point where you are so overcompensated by saying no so many times that it no longer frightens you, it's just like exposure therapy. Do it again and again and again and again, and it will desensitize you. And then guess what? Saying no isn't actually going to be that scary because you've said it so many times. You've said it until you're blue in the face that it's no big deal anymore. So that's something that, of course, there's going to be a lot of people who are really uncomfortable doing that, but that's the point. It's like you want to walk through the fire as fast as you possibly can, get it over with, rip the Band-Aid off. And then once you have put that into practice and you've gone through this overcorrection process, at the end, you're going to be able to measure your results. You can evaluate yourself. Okay, this is where I started at the beginning of the month. This is where I'm at the end of the month. And how do I feel about telling people no after doing this as much as I possibly can? How afraid do I feel after doing this as much as I possibly can? Another example of overcorrection is if you struggle with taking action. You may have heard of Mel Robbins wrote this book called The 5-Second Rule. I'm just going to be completely transparent. I read the book. I don't think it's worth reading. I'll spoil the entire book for you in 2 sentences or less. All you have to do is count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 before you do something and then launch yourself into action on the 1. This is a wonderful overcorrection strategy if you struggle to take action. Or if you, like one of the examples in the book is like if you struggle to get out of bed, when your alarm goes off, you just count backwards from 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and launch yourself out of bed. And then do that again and again and again. You just use that count and then take action at the very end. If you do that enough, it's like things are not going to feel like such intense labor. A lot of the time, we struggle with action because we like play it through in our mind and we think that it's going to take a lot of energy, or it's going to take a lot of time, or it's going to be difficult, or we talk ourselves out of doing things that we have the impulse to do if we allow it to move through the brain first. You're going to start dreading it if you actually bring it up into the brain. So that's one of the ways to correct that. That entire book was basically just that one overcorrection tool specifically to solve the action taking piece. I also did this in the very beginning of building my business. One of the things that I knew was that I was really afraid of live video. I knew that I had some perfectionism stuff that was coming up around my tarot readings that I wanted to post online. I knew that I was going to want to edit myself or cut things out or pick it apart. And so the way that I overcorrected that problem was I started going live on Facebook. Back in 2017, I just ripped the Band-Aid off. I just put out live video. I didn't give myself the opportunity to not do the thing or to correct it or pick it apart or trim it to death or anything like that. And then what ended up happening was it segued into just posting raw footage on YouTube. All of my readings, if you watched my readings in like 2017, 2018, I think for like the first year, I was posting nothing but raw footage. I was literally filming on my iPhone. I had a tiny monopod that I bought for like $12. I would film it and then I would just upload it from my phone onto YouTube. So that was my personal solution to perfectionism. And now it's like I have the luxury of editing things, and I have an editor that I can send footage to anytime that I'm filming something. And so now when I'm polishing something or having someone else polish something, it's not from this place of perfectionism. It's from this is a way to elevate my content, essentially. So whatever it is that feels really out of whack or that you have a lot of fear around, a lot of the time it's a matter of getting the brain out of the way, overcorrecting, desensitizing yourself to whatever the thing is. You want to desensitize yourself, and then from there you can see where you land. Then once your nervous system actually comes down and it's not so activating to you or scary, or it's not putting you into survival so much, then you can actually start tuning it in a way that feels sustainable over time. Like with the example of say no constantly. Just say no as much as you can. Say no as boldly as you can to as many people as you can. Be unapologetic about how you say no. By no means do I think that should be sustained for the rest of your life. There's a great deal of variety that can be applied to the delivery of a no. It's not limited to just say no for the sake of saying no. That's an overcorrection practice that you would do over a short period of time simply for the purpose of desensitizing yourself. That's it. Here's another example that happens a lot with clients. They have a feminine core. So this is something that is very, very common in my work. I have a client who has a feminine core who has overcompensated with masculine energy to get a result, which the thing is that can work, but it's very difficult to sustain that for a feminine core. You start burning out, other things get sacrificed, your relationship is all out of whack. There's a lot of negative consequences to a feminine core running things in an exclusively masculine way. So an overcorrection with feminine energy is the medicine for the overcompensation in the masculine energy. Because moving farther in that direction, if you were to keep going farther and farther and farther into masculine energy, it would be an even it would be an even more terrifying launch into the feminine, because the polarity is going to be so extreme. Think about it in terms of there's going to be an equal opposite reaction to what you've been doing. Now, the important thing to keep in mind is that a lot of projections start coming up in the overcorrection process. So sticking to the example of you're doing things in a masculine way, you want to do them in a feminine way, or start integrating more of the feminine. A lot of the time what ends up coming up for people is, I feel lazy. I feel like I'm not doing enough. I feel like everything's going to bottom out. I'm scared. I'm scared to not give as much action as I've been giving to this situation because I associate the action with keeping me afloat. So generally, there's a lot of fear and anxiety that comes up around laziness or not doing or not exerting or whatever condition you've put on yourself in order to receive. Because it's all conditional. A lot of the time people believe that receiving is a conditional thing that's based on action or what people think of you or how big your social media is, or whatever. People make up all sorts of stuff. What your astrology chart looks like. There's infinite reasons why people limit their ability to receive. The same type of fear comes up around setting boundaries for people. If I start telling you it's important for you to prioritize yourself, it's important for you to say no, set boundaries, choose yourself, blah, 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 all of these things that are really essential in order to break out of codependency or break any cycles of self-neglect. A lot of the time, the fear and anxiety will present itself as, that's mean, that's selfish, I'm afraid people aren't going to love me anymore because the condition to receiving love, again, that receiving piece, is how much I sacrifice myself. The bigger the martyr I am, the more I am loved. That is a fucked up correlation that so many people have that it actually comes to life. So they start exploiting themselves. And in really extreme cases, this shifts people all the way into a full-blown prostitute archetype. The prostitute archetype is, I'm doing things that I don't want to do in exchange for this other thing that I want. We all have this archetype. This is not something that is exclusive to any one person, and it has nothing to do with sex work. This has to do with an exchange on the basis of, I don't want to do this. This is misaligned. This is a misaligned choice for me. I'm only doing it to get that. I'm only doing it to stay alive. And when it comes to overcorrection, well then, yes, if you have been sacrificing yourself, then the overcorrection is going to be selfishness and choosing yourself. That has to be something to balance the other side of the scale. So if you were coming to me with those types of patterns, I would say, yes, choose yourself and tell that to people's faces. Now, the thing is, if you are in the archetypes that I just mentioned, and you try to move the needle 1%, a lot of the time, people will go from martyr to beggar. So you'll go from, I'm sacrificing myself to be loved, into, I'm begging for a crumb. I need to beg and plead in order to receive. I need to make a case. But in my opinion, I think that moving from martyr to beggar is a lateral move. I don't think that is actually moving you in the direction that you want to go necessarily. I mean, I guess you can make that move, but it's going to be very, very slow. Why not just catapult yourself into some hardcore selfishness for a very short amount of time in order to balance the scales and then reevaluate next month? What I'm about to say does not apply to parents with young kids, of course. It's not going to land in the same way. But the overcorrection might be something like, I have decided for the next month, I'm not going to give a fuck about anyone else's needs at all. If you need something, too bad, go ask someone else. If you need someone to hold space for you, if you need a shoulder to cry on, don't call me for the next month. If you need a favor, if you need help doing something, don't call me. Don't text me, don't email me, don't reach out to me. I'm not helping. If your boss asks you to do something that's outside of your job description, say no. Unless they want to go to the trouble of going to HR, changing the formal job description, changing the rate of pay in order to add that task onto the list, unless they want to go through that whole rigmarole, then it's a no. Only be available for what's on your job description. Now, here's the caveat to this. I'm giving you this tool. However, a lot of you are not going to be able to do this particular thing solo. Unless it's something like what I mentioned with, just doing live Facebook videos in the very beginning of this particular business. That was how I started. That was an easy form of overcorrection. If you're overcorrecting in the sense of, I need to take more action, so I'm going to do that countdown thing, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and just launch myself into doing the action before I have time to think, those types of overcorrections are easy. But something that is going to put you into a state of survival, or if it is going to be really hard on your nervous system, or if it is something that's really intense, like shifting a lifetime of martyrdom patterning or overcompensating with masculine energy for your alignment or for your feminine energy or for things that haven't been integrated or unresolved trauma. I see people do a lot of overcompensating with stress. I'm going to take on more stress so I can avoid all of this stuff that is just brewing under the surface. And I'm just going to try to keep a lid on all of this. If you're dealing with something like that, attempting to overcorrect that on your own is something that, you're going to do whatever you want. I wouldn't recommend it in case it does end up sending you into trauma, or it's really hard for you to hold the vision, or maybe you make an attempt, but it's not something that sticks. If it's not sticking, then that might be an indication that it's one of those areas where you do need some support in order to get you there faster. Because the thing about different types of support, whether it be therapy or, a group container of some sort, a one-on-one practitioner that you like working with, whoever, a lot of the time just being able to touch base and being immersed in some type of energetic field that you can calibrate to and continue coming back to again and again and again is how you sustain the energy long enough in order to actually experience the change. That's not always easy to do on your own unless it's little stuff. So of course, I'm telling you all of these things. However, I completely understand why, one, just so you know, this isn't everyone's style. This is most definitely not going to be the right practice for everyone. It's not necessarily going to be the right next move for you. So I just want to be really transparent about that. If you're listening to this and you're like, you sound crazy, that would send me into a trauma spiral. Okay, then for you, maybe the right next move, the right container would be more of a traditional trauma therapist, someone who does some somatic work, right? That type of healer might actually be the better container for you to be in. So just keep that in mind. I am not telling you that this is going to solve all of your problems or that this is even the right tool for you. It's a tool, but that doesn't mean that we just want to use a hammer for everything. So there's a time and a place for this. There's a time and a place for focusing on the 1%. There's a time and a place for all types of different work. This is just one of those things that I'm a really big fan of personally. It's something that I use for myself. It's something that I use with other people. And I really like what I find in this practice. So just to cover my ass, I am not suggesting that you should say, I want to be able to lift 200 pounds heavier, and that you go into the gym and you get a hernia as a result of attempting to overcorrect in the gym. Okay, that's not what we're trying to do. I'm not trying to push you into something traumatic, but you are responsible for the amount of self-awareness that you have around which tool you opt for. This is the thing that is most important. In what area can you actually handle overcorrecting without support? That's the actual question. If you are with a therapist, with a practitioner, with a healer, or a trainer, there's probably a lot of ways that you can overcorrect in a safe and constructive way, but you have to be able to decide, what are you ready for? How far are you willing to go? Not how far is your mind willing to let you go? Because remember, the mind is always going to tap out first. It is always going to be the weakest link. Always, always, always. In my opinion, I think that the mind is very limited in terms of what it's good for, what it's useful for. It's a fantastic tool. It is wildly exceptional. It is so extraordinary when you know how to use it. But the thing is, we're not taught, generally speaking, how to constructively use the mind, which is why it keeps us super limited. Anyway, I can feel another episode beginning to emerge, so I'm going to cut this one off. So just know, overcorrection, fantastic tool when you were doing it in a conscious way. We are not talking about overcompensating for areas that need your attention, or trying to muscle your way through something and just continue moving in the direction you've always been going. If you know something isn't working, it's time to start moving in the opposite direction and start balancing those scales. If you feel like you're at a plateau, if you feel like you're in a rut, if you feel like things are really jammed up or clogged up, overcorrection is one of the best ways, in my opinion and experience, in order to start moving the needle. So that is what I have for you today. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. I hope that if you feel inspired to write a review on Apple for me, if you're a real fan, if you're a super fan, go leave me a review on iTunes. I have tons of 5-star reviews. I'm so proud of myself. I'm so proud of this work. Thank you so much to all of my listeners. I appreciate you more than you could ever possibly know. I love and adore you and wish you nothing but the best. If you feel someone could use this, make sure that you send this to them. If you want to apply to Eden, go get inside, go apply. I will see you in there. And get on my newsletter because things are coming. There are big things that are coming. 2022 is going to be epic. I can't wait to see you on the other side, and I will talk to you next time. Bye-bye.